Thanks everybody for coming. My name is Travis Parigi. I am the founder and chief operating officer at Liquid Frameworks, and I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your morning to join us today. And I think right now there are some interesting things shaping up that could make for some nice opportunities for companies that recognize those opportunities and are willing to take advantage of them, leverage them, and act on them. I think there's some real nice benefits. So first, let's talk about just the macroeconomic aspect of what's going on and see how that is impacting our customers. Before I get into this slide, there's a couple other things I wanted to mention. I do think that beyond some of the technicals that are taking place in the oil and gas space, if you zoom out even bigger and look at what's taking place on a national scale with our economy, I think we are coming into some nice sailing in 17. I think that even if Federal Open Markets Committee raises rates like the talk is right now on the street, even if they raise it by 50 basis points, 75 basis points, I still think that you're going to see rates historically low, and that's going to make for some great opportunity for investment capital. Private equity firms have a tremendous amount of cash still on the sidelines that is available to invest, and so I think that will make capital projects some smooth sailing as far as raising money and continuing to fund those kind of opportunities in the future. So having said all that, let's go to Cushing. So I look at a lot of different things at Liquid Frameworks from an oil and gas perspective, and I picked a couple of the ones that I look at most frequently, and Cushing inventory is one of those. And if we look at Cushing, I've just taken a slice of the last 5 years. So prior to before we got into sort of the situation that we're in, through back a little bit, back when things were a little bit frothier. And so if you look at what's taking place, what's interesting to me in this data is that we've come off the historic high of 68 million barrels in storage inventory in Cushing. And we're off by about 14% off that historic high, down by about 10 million barrels. And so I think that represents a nice trend that we're seeing in the space that can be indicative, be it leading or lagging, of supply and demand. And so I feel like that's a nice indicator. I think that certainly is reflected in the sentiment that we get from our customers and what they're reflecting in some of their Q4 growth projection numbers. We have a lot of customers that we talk to on a daily basis, and some of them are kind enough to share a lot of their numbers with us as far as growth and revenue and things like that. And we are hearing from customers that are seeing 10 and 20% growth in Q4 compared to the previous year. So I think that's really encouraging. This is an encouraging number as well. So let's leave Cushing and take a look at U.S. rig count. So U.S. rig count, we're certainly way off of our historic highs of just over 2,000. But the thing that I find interesting and encouraging here is the trend that seems to be shaking up over the last several months as we start to trend upward a little bit. And so this trend is much more pronounced than any of the trends that we've seen in the last 5 years. And I'm not really just a technical analyst. I wouldn't characterize myself as that. I certainly look at the fundamentals and market sentiment, and I think that those things are playing nicely into what we're seeing as well. And so having said that, I think this next slide is interesting. This is actually one of the most interesting slides, I think, for me, and it's OPEC's fiscal break-even budget number. And so a lot of these countries, this is not all the OPEC countries, there's about 14, but I've taken out some of the ones that are the way outliners. I mean, if you look at Libya's break-even number, it's so high that it just throws these numbers way off. I mean, it would further help my argument, but I'm trying to be somewhat reasonably objective here. And so if you take a look at these and you look at their break number, this is not their lifting cost. It's not their break even for cost of production. It's their national budgets. And so this is price per barrel break even on their national budgets. That's a pretty staggering set of numbers that you see up there. And so a lot of, obviously, if you go through and average this, it's a very high number. You've got $86 a barrel. And so I don't want to be dependent upon what this cartel might do as far as moving supply up and down in order to control the price, as they've historically done. But they certainly could. Will they? I don't know. Maybe. They might. They certainly can. If you look at what they're producing, on a daily basis. This is million barrels of production per day. They certainly have the spare capacity. 10% of that is about what's estimated. If you look at what some other analysts say, they might think that number's a little bit aggressive and put it at 2.5 million, but I put it at about 3.1 million barrels per day in spare capacity. So they certainly can do it. It's a question of will they do it? And I definitely think they're getting pressure from their citizens simply because of the social programs they have going on to do that. But I look at this and go, well, they can just cut their national budgets. So Travis, this $86, there's no way. And you're probably right. They certainly can. Saudi Arabia did that. So Saudi Arabia did that in 2015. Their national budget break-even number was $95. So now it's 67. So it's come off 30%. So even if I'm not here, and let's say that these countries go, well, we're going to go ahead and cut our national budget. We're not going to cut our production. So for us, that would mean, whoa, still there's a lot of supply slack in the supply line. And so if that turns out to be the case, let's say they did 30%, just like Saudi Arabia, which was historic. Let's say they could do 30%. That still puts my number 86 at 60, which is where everybody thinks that oil is going in 17. And so I think this makes for a nice case as well as far as where the market is going. But I don't really want to be beholden to what OPEC does. I don't want my business at the whim, my margins of my business at the whim of what these guys end up doing as far as supply. I would rather have my business set up to run as efficiently as possible and take advantage of opportunity when I see that, so that when the commodity floats up and down, I can still operate smoothly. I can still scale my business up, scale it down in a very easy fashion, smooth fashion, in order to maintain the margins that I need. And so how do we do that? One way that we do that is by looking at all of the major processes that we're running internally and with our customer and finding ways to improve those processes. And the best way that I know how to do that is by making those processes end-to-end electronic. So automation, implementation of things like Field FX, going through those processes and making sure that we're running and operating as efficiently as possible. And so those benefits that we see when we do that are numerous. And I just want to highlight a couple of those from a service provider perspective. So from the oil and gas service providers in the room, it significantly increases cash flow. It reduces errors. It makes the impact on labor far reduced, where I can do more with less. And then the most important thing, if you ask me, if you looked at all these and said, what's the most important thing? I would say it's customer responsiveness. Because our customers are asking us to do that. The operators are saying to us, hey, we want to do business electronically. We want you to implement processes where I can get to data in a faster way, in a more electronic way, seamlessly. And so they're telling us that. And so when I look at our business, Liquid Frameworks, and what motivates us to do things, yes, cash flow, yes, revenue, growth, all that stuff's important. But the thing that I act on most importantly, the thing that motivates me the most is what the customers ask for. That's what we put into the product. That's what we're doing. And so we're looking at what our customers want to do, and we're reacting and doing those things. But the benefits don't stop with the service providers. There's the operator too. So our customer, the operator, gets tons of benefits as well. The reason they're asking for these things is because it costs them a lot to process paper. These paper invoices that come in, paper field tickets, they get buried in paper. It takes a long time to process them. You got to send them back to get corrected. There's all sorts of issues with contract compliance. And so by moving all these processes to an electronic world, we end up in a situation where things flow a lot more efficiently and a lot more accurately. So there's a lot of good cases to be made for automating those things. So from a macro perspective, I think things are really ramping up, shaping up to look good into 17 and 18. But then if we zoom down a little bit and look at the people that we're working with, so all this automation is great, but the people that we need to do that, the boots on the ground, that's our field engineer, our field ops people, our technicians, our engineers that are out there. And a lot of times I hear from people, customers and potential customers that say, this stuff is great, but I don't know if my field engineer can do these things. And I'm here to tell you, I've been doing this now for since 2005, and I've seen such great success and such great take up from field engineers in the field that you might not necessarily think You might not think that they're out there using technology, but I'm telling you they are. And I've got a couple of charts that I want to share with you real fast that show you that. So this chart, it's a little bit hard to see, is talking about smartphone adoption, tablet PC adoption. So you can see it's going up. 2/3 of the people in the country all have smartphones. That's no surprise. But the interesting thing to me is the gaming consoles, MP3s, all those kind of devices, it's pretty stagnant. And why is that? Because you can do everything on your smartphone and your tablet PC. And so if we look at this in a slice it up by age, because a lot of times our field engineers might be a little bit on the right on the demographic curve, and so people will say, well, they're not using tablet PCs, they're not using smartphones. Well, I don't know, that might not necessarily be the case. If we look at this, we can see that in those various age groups, there's a significant portion of that demographic that is indeed using that type of technology. And they're not using it just to make phone calls. They're certainly not paying $100 for data plans just to pick up the phone when they could do that with their old school razors. And so what are they doing? Well, they're using apps, and they're using consumer apps. They're using apps that let them look at their grandkids on Facebook, let them look at their kids on Instagram, and all these different apps that are out there. These aren't business apps, obviously. Some of them are used for business apps. If you look at Google's dominance here, some of them are. But what I'm trying to present here is that they're using technology. They're becoming adept at navigating through apps and working with these types of user interfaces that in the past might have been a little bit uncomfortable. And so it just demonstrates that while some people may say, oh, my field engineers, they're not going to do that. Well, they might not do it today because they're using paper, but I can tell you if you put something in their hands, they're certainly going to be able to achieve that because they're doing it right now with all these different apps. I mean, this is million active users per month. I mean, it's just a tremendous number. And so you might sit there and go, well, I don't want my field engineers doing all that stuff out in the field. I want them doing their job. Well, there's great mobile device management software out there that can manage, configure, secure, support, and make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing when they're on their particular, when they're doing their job site work. So a lot of compelling factors. The macroeconomics look good. I think that when you couple that with technology adoption, as we see that proliferate through all the way down to the field engineers, I think that's coming together to make for a nice opportunity for companies that want to get their businesses to operate more efficiently and directly respond to what the customers are asking for. So the customers are asking for it. For me, I mean, that's one of the most important things. We meet with a lot of operators nowadays and hear exactly what they want. We were just on Monday, we had some Liquid Frameworks people at the PIDEX meeting, Petroleum International Data Exchange, which is a nonprofit consortium of oil and gas companies that come together to define data standards. So we had some guys there, and the whole meeting was around field ticketing, e-field ticketing. And this is great because it elevates that in the consciousness of the service provider and the operators, and they're defining the ways that these companies will exchange data back and forth. And of course, Field Effects will facilitate that format along with all the other formats that are out there to exchange data. So some great things taking place. Customers are asking for it. Well, thanks so much for coming, y'all. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this was some valuable information. Great case studies. Thank you, Tenaris. Thank you, WWT International. Really appreciate y'all taking the time to do this. And thanks for everybody for coming out. We'll stick around if you have any other questions afterwards. And thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.